this is huge, and this is the kind of evidence that the individuals that refused to, or they didn't refuse to cooperate, they decided to exercise their Fifth Amendment rights when they were before the congressional probe. This is one of those ways that non-lawyers and non-trial lawyers can understand how criminal proceeding is different. It's yielded this tsunami of new information. And I think to Tim's first point, it shows that Trump's hands were on the steering wheel of the real minutia of the fake electors plot and the coup plot and the recruiting of state officials at the peak of COVID to come and be a part of the fake electors plot. Let me read this. This is from the Washington Post reporting. Ex-Trump allies detail efforts to overturn an election in Georgia, plea videos. The former Trump lawyer said he booked 3 rooms at what was then the Trump International Hotel and offered one to James Troupis, the former Wisconsin judge who was leading the Trump campaign's legal efforts to challenge the Wisconsin results. Chesbro told prosecutors that when Troupis realized he was in Washington, he asked him to come meet a courier who was flying to D.C. with documents related to the Wisconsin electors. The plan, Chesbro said, was to get them to the staff of Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, who would then hand them to Pence during the joint session of Congress for the counting of electoral college votes on January 6th. A lot of this happens. I mean, Trump is in motion, and Ron Johnson's, over there on January 6th, trying to hand off his, as Bill Barr would say, BS slates to Pence. It's amazing how, if you reverse engineer it, Trump had his hands on all of this intricate plotting.
And not to draw your metaphor too broadly, Nicolle, but the clown car, right? The president has his hands on a lot of clown car steering wheels all at the same time. I don't disagree with the premise that there was an increasing view inside the Oval Office that the only solution was going to be political. But Trump has his hands on multiple steering wheels during this critical time. I think the dates are so helpful and interesting that come from this proffer today and this great reporting on the leaked videos of the plea discussions that these witnesses against Trump provide. Let's put a couple on the board. December 19 is the day of that Christmas party where even Jenna Ellis, who has pushed a lot of flawed fraud allegations and flawed legal theories up until this point to try to help her president stay in office, even she is flummoxed and stunned when right-hand aide Dan Scavino says, the boss just wants to stay in office, we're going to stay, we don't care. We don't care that we lost in the Supreme Court. We're going to stay. So December 19 is important because, to me, for multiple days after that period, Donald Trump is calling his acting attorney general. Remember, he's essentially booted Bill Barr out of the Department of Justice. Barr has left on his own power, but the president has indicated to Bill Barr he's fed up with his assessment that there is no legitimate fraud that would change the outcome of the election. Sorry, boss, it's BS, you lost. So now, from this point on, Donald Trump is calling his acting attorney general, pestering him every single day, something we learned from Tim Hafey's work, asking, pestering, demanding, insisting, find the fraud. Find the fraud. I have some other examples I want to bring back to you. I have some other examples I'd like to resurface with you that Barr already told me were crapola, but I'd like you to look at them again, and I'd like you to find them and corroborate them. And if you don't do it, I have another idea for another acting attorney general. Let's put another hand on another steering wheel, if you don't mind, Nicolle. Again, from great reporting, great congressional investigative work, great follow-up reporting and criminal investigative process. Another key date is January 3rd, 4th, and 5th,
right, when
Donald Trump starts unleashing his Twitter megaphone, a new word I just thought of,
I just wrote it down.
to essentially turn his allies on Mike Pence. He starts telling people, okay, my last steering wheel move is to get Pence to block the certification. And if I can't get him to do it, I want all of you to come to the Capitol and help me push him and the rest of the Republicans to do it. So there's a president is not giving up on any of his cars getting to the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, and Charlie, it's so important. And I want to put another, we're going to totally pervert the metaphor. I'll put another hand on another steering wheel. This is from the conversation yesterday with John Karl and the reporting for his new book. Right. If he could have, he would have had the hands on all the steering wheels at the Pentagon. He's irate when the military issues a one-line statement saying the U.S. military will not get involved in determining an American election. I mean, something that wouldn't even be newsworthy if the then commander-in-chief hadn't been, you know, enraged by it. But his hands are inside the Pentagon. His hands are inside the Justice Department. His hands are inside DHS. His hands are deep inside wanting to appoint Sidney Powell special counsel. He's talking about, I mean, he's basically one insurrection act or declaration of martial law away from doing what Jenna Ellis said he wanted to do, which was, quote, "We're not going to leave."
And as Bill Barr said, he was also detached from reality. And that's what strikes me about this. Look, I mean, you know, the story about Dan Scavino, this is hearsay. Dan Scavino is a notorious loudmouth and idiot. But it's an indication of the rabbit holes that this White House was prepared to go, how little interest they had in the peaceful transfer of power. And John Karl's also reporting that Donald Trump became obsessed with the notion that even after he had left office, that he could be reinstated as president. I mean, so, you know, think about all of this together. It's easy to take these things separate, you know, to separate them out and see them as discrete little incidents. But what you have here is a president of the United States who was detached from reality, completely uninterested in the constitutional norm of the peaceful transfer of power, surrounding himself with people who were feeding him, you know, crackpot conspiracy theories, ignoring the voices in the room, telling him the truth. And to that story about the Pentagon issuing that one sentence, at the time, it was alarming. In retrospect, it's even more alarming to realizing that the president, in fact, was trying all of this, how dangerous that particular moment was.
Carol, I want to come back to you and ask you if you think that these proffer sessions change or solidify any thinking about who the witnesses might be in Jack Smith's federal election case before Judge Tanya Chutkan.
You know, I want to pause there for a moment because I'm not a prosecutor as often as I cover them. And so I think what I'd rather answer is another version of your question and say, when I saw Jenna Ellis describing in detail what was going on inside the White House, I thought that would be pretty useful for Jack Smith, if he doesn't already have it, if he doesn't already know it. I thought that would be pretty useful to getting to the heart of how many people were sort of stunned, even the lieutenants, even the fringe lieutenants who were willing to sail on this crazy ship for a few weeks longer without real evidence of fraud, without real evidence of significant irregularities. Even they were taken aback by what the president, the boss, and his top lieutenants were pushing forward.
You know, Carol, let me ask it a different way, because I think the thread, I guess, that goes through Michael Cohen and that goes through all of the folks who pleaded guilty until they were pardoned by Trump in Mueller is that we have this sense from the outside that the bar is higher for Trump, that they must have so much evidence to take these extraordinary steps. And that always bears out. Right? These are the Trumpiest Trump people, and their proffer sessions reveal that in their inner dialogue, as is conveyed in their proffer sessions, we'll stipulate that, is to basically think that this was all bonkers and unfounded and without predicate in any facts, even on Earth 2, where they all resided until they were charged with crimes. There's nothing that sort of erodes that narrative that it's always worse than it looks from the outside. Absolutely,
3,000%. As a journalist, you wish all the time, and we joke about it in the newsroom. You wish you had subpoena power because of the kinds of things you can learn when people are no longer talking in sound bites and PR optics, but are actually speaking in self-interest to prevent themselves from going to jail. That is the power of our rule of law. And that is why people get into a lot of trouble when they lie to federal investigators. That is why we have a distinct country with a lot of importance placed on truth and honesty. And Jenna Ellis seems to be telling the truth in these videotaped remarks, because even she is taken aback by the gall of the president's plan. The boss is just going to stay in power. We don't care.